Allison Reese. I'm the print editor of Harp Column magazine, and I'm joined today by Kimberly Rowe, our web editor for Harp Column and founder, as well as three special guests today. We have Yolanda Kondoassis, Elizabeth Volpé Bligh, and Gary Schocker. And they're here today to talk about their pieces that we're featuring in our April monthly music club. So we're so happy that everybody's here today. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind everybody that our current March-April issue of Harp Column is out right now. So if you are not currently a subscriber, you can still get instant access to that by subscribing on our website. And also we have our next issue, our May June issue coming out very so if you are not a subscriber, go ahead and get that in your mailbox in a few weeks.
Allison, we're getting a little bit of feedback.
Ooh, yeah.
It sometimes helps if the people that aren't talking themselves.
Yeah, I was just looking.
All right, let's try that again. Oh, that seems a little better. Yikes. Okay. No one wants to hear themselves in an echo. That's not pleasant. Okay, so if you aren't currently a subscriber, go ahead and visit that link that Kim just put in the chat, and you can subscribe in time to get our May-June issue in your mailbox. That's coming out in a few short weeks. We're just putting the final touches on that right now. But today, you are all here to hear from our special guests and learn a little bit more about the pieces that we're featuring in our April monthly music club. So we're going to start today with Elizabeth Volpé Bligh. Elizabeth probably needs no introduction for most people. She's a very familiar face in the harp world and at Harp Column. She was a longtime principal harpist of the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. She retired in 2018 after many years. I think you started in about 1982.
That's right.
Is that right? Yeah. So many years. And she is still very active teaching in the harp world, active with the American Harp Society. And she has released many arrangements and original compositions that we feature on Harp Column Music. We'll put a link to all of her music in the chat if you want to check it out. But Elizabeth, this month we're featuring your Tango for Rain, which is such a fun piece to play. Maybe everybody who's here in the audience can show by a show of hands who's working on Elizabeth's piece this month. But I think one of the really interesting defining characteristics of this piece are the Latin rhythms that you use in the piece. So I wondered if you could just start out by talking about those Latin rhythms and maybe giving some advice as to how harpists can work on those.
Okay. Well, this is a topic that's very dear to my heart because I love Latin music. I love Spanish music. There's something about it, even though I don't have a single drop of that heritage in my body, but I love that stuff. And so I called it Tango for the Rain, and then I started wondering, after I'd written it and published it, I got in touch with Alfredo Ortiz to ask him, is this really a tango or is it a habanera? Because the more I think about it, I think it's a habanera. And he goes, well, it's actually a habanera. But it's got elements of the tango in it. And I have a letter actually from Alfredo talking about the differences with some links as well as to examples on YouTube about the different types of dance. But one thing he did say was the tango tends to be almost like a march. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, dun, 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 dun. That's a really famous one. And the habanera is much more of a gentle kind of a dance with the dun, 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 dun. In fact, the habanera from Carmen was basically, Bizet basically stole it from Iradier, who wrote La Paloma, the famous La Paloma one. So because it's got these very sudden, brusque kind of bits in it, I think it's kind of a amalgamation of the two styles, so it's really both. And it's got also a lot of fast muffles, which is, I think, also the same kind of brusque feel of the tango. And if you've ever seen Argentinian tango, you can see that there's a lot of very fast movements where the legs are whipping around and, like dips and so forth. So I thought I would get into just how to make this style work. But the other thing I wanted to mention too is there's another type of tango. Well, there's probably a whole bunch of but one of them is a flamenco tango, which I remember learning in dance class. And it's completely different. So if you're interested in this subject, you can just Google tangos or Google flamenco tango or Argentinian tango and get some examples of it. And it's really it can go down a rabbit hole. So I just thought I would just talk a little bit about, just play a little bit of like examples from the piece. It's quite short. I could even just play through the whole thing because it's like literally, if I don't do the repeat, it's like less than a minute. So maybe I'll just do that, and then I'll point out some of the things that you can do when you're practicing it. So I'll just, and I'm not used to the lever harp so much. I tend to play the pedal harp more, so I'm kind of hunting around for notes sometimes. There's my pedal harp technique. I pulled too hard. Anyway, yeah, I tend to overplay this thing. But there's a lot of crossings, and I think this is where, in fact, I had one spot where I actually did bump, because you have to make sure when you're crossing that you leave yourself that room and that you don't have a knuckle kind of over here and that your hand isn't too far forward. But the main thing is the timing. That's what I've discovered, is if you can make sure that finger, the crossing finger, is on before you play the thumb, you're pretty much set. And then you have to know where you're going, so then you have to grab a handful. So there's all those two elements there. And then also when you come to the next bar, that's bar 6, you have this. And so I use that good old technique where you just pretend like you're going to play a scale. You just grab everything and then you pull off 2 of them, leaving the other 2 on. And it's in all your Larry Vier books and various other types of exercises. And then you have an option of just coming right off or putting your thumb back on. And then another crossing. And the next bar, we got another thing. We got the thumb slide. So there's that. There's a whole bunch of, and so with thumb slides, I like to get everything on, and then slide if I can, if there's time. Whoopsie. And then these glissandos, I wrote them with a certain, top note, but it's really not that big a deal. You can just kind of go for it. So you want to get the style more than the actual note. So just whatever. Just the idea is you're trying to emulate that kind of a dip when the partner dips the woman and she's sort of like, coming back up. And then you have to be careful about how you're going to play. So I just keep that ready to go, park it, and ready to go. And that way you can't miss. And then, of course, you've got this. And I've got dampenings marked all over the place. And I think it's more, I tried to put them exactly where I would. And then I realized, for example, in that bar, I'm letting the left-hand note ring 2 beats. I should have written it as a half note. But I did put the dampen right where I wanted it. So you have this. Like that. And then the next one is really fast. So when you're coming from here, just really, really quickly. And I didn't put really any dynamics in, but that this is the kind of music you can kind of do what you want with it. You can decide that you want something softer or louder. But I do like to have a big crescendo in 17, where you have this. And then here's another one. And when I come down for this one, I only place the 4 and the 2 here so that my thumb is not in the way when I'm coming down. And then I'm all set to go. And yeah, just more of these little crossings. Any other little, I'm just gonna, let's see, I've got the muffles. I wanted to make sure I covered some of this thing. Also, yeah, in bar 23, I do the same thing, only reverse from, instead of this, it's this. So this is actually a piece you can use to build some of these technical things. It's a nice sort of fun way to practice them. But a lot of people struggle with, this kind of pattern. And the main thing is to get them placed before you try to pull them off. So on bar 6, you're coming from, make sure you're bang on before you try to start this little, if they're not quite placed, this is going to get a, stumbly. Let me see, there's a, yeah, and then at the end, this little tacked on ending that I did was sort of the kind of the rain thing. You're probably wondering, what does this have to do with rain? And this was like Vancouver, we get a lot of rain. I even have a piece I wrote called Fall in Vancouver, which is all about the sort of wistful feeling you have in Vancouver when the skies start opening up after a beautiful summer and you're just getting rained on all the time. This is the same idea. So you have this thing where it's been fun, you've been dancing in the sunshine, and here comes the rain. Sort of sad. Now here's a chance, you can play this scale all in one hand. Or you can break it up if you're not comfortable. That's okay. You can do it like that, it's fine. And then this ending, I thought, I didn't write it in, but you could do a nice crescendo towards the end. So you've got this soft little part from 30 to 36 or something after the scale. And start to crescendo, maybe. And then, now here you could also just dampen by this way. You could just come back and replace your fingers. Anyway, so you've done this, 2, 3, 4, 1. And that's an immediate dampen, so like right on the half, the 8th note rest there. So I think I covered most of what I wanted to talk about as far as this. Any questions about it?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions for Elizabeth, go ahead and put them in the chat so we can ask her. Elizabeth, I was just curious, in this piece, there are so many fundamental harp techniques. Was that intentional? Did you intentionally put those in there, or did that just kind of happen organically?
Well, the funny thing is I wrote this specifically for a class I teach sometimes at through the VSO School of Music, where we do this online class. In fact, one of the fellows here today is from that class. And we were talking about Latin rhythm, so I thought, why don't I just write something? But I always try to work in, like you say, I try to work in some ideas for just building technique, because that's one of the points of the class. And I think people that's what they sign up for. Oh, that's good. Thank you, Constance.
Yeah, that was, I feel like we all just got a quick masterclass on this piece. That was great. Elizabeth, thank you so much for a great piece.
Thank you.
And also sharing some insights into it. I think now we're going to transition over to our second piece for Monthly Music Club. I think, Kim, we're going to have you introduce this piece.
Yeah, so we have 2 guests with us today. We have the composer of Memory of Trees, Gary Schocker, and Gary is primarily a flutist, but also a harpist and a pianist, and of course a composer. And Gary, I read on your website you have over 300 published pieces, and we have, I think, approximately 30 of those at Harp Column Music, and you were one of our original Harp Column Music artists, so thank you. And you collaborated with Yolanda Kondoassis, who I am very happy to introduce. Yolanda is one of the premier recording artists of the harp. Yolanda, I tried to find out exactly how many recordings you have, and I couldn't find a number. Do you have one in your head? Oh, we need you to unmute.
Yep. Gosh, probably around, I don't know, 25 or so.
Okay. But you've recorded. Now I'm hearing my. Let's see.
Should I mute again?
You might need to. So Yolanda has recorded for Telarc and Azika and many other labels, and her arrangements have been published by Carl Fisher. And Yolanda, when I was reading about everything you've done, you're a soloist, a teacher, a recording artist, a publisher, a speaker, and an author of children's books. And also, of course, an environmental activist, which is how this whole project came about, your collaboration with Gary and some other composers. So maybe you can just, the 2 of you can tell us a little bit about how the project came about and why.
Well, maybe I'll start, Gary, if that's okay. The simple story of it is that Gary had written an absolutely gorgeous piece for the guitarist Jason VO and me to take on tour. And we ended up recording that as well, called Hypnotized. And it would just, I mean, Gary sure has a way with a line, a phrase, a melody, and that piece, in addition to being a joy to play, was just a real favorite of audiences. And so the short story is, I hit him up to be a part of my 5 Minutes for Earth project, which was it's a signature initiative of my nonprofit, Earth at Heart. And the idea is that Earth at Heart is curating a collection of music. There are about 20 or so pieces in that collection right now that are available to harpists anywhere in the world. And when a harpist or a musician, actually, we're branching out into all instruments now, when anyone plays, programs, and reports that performance to Earth at Heart will then make a donation in honor of that performance to a worthy environmental organization. And Gary was part of the very first phase of that collection. And when I first talked with him, he said, well, I've got some ideas, and sort of Gary, you can correct me, but either it was a piece you'd already completed and you were kind of wondering what to do with it, or it was a sketch or something, I can't remember. But, we talked about it, and it was, his concept was exactly, what I was looking for this project. And again, no surprise, it's this gorgeous capsule of a time, a place, and, melodies, you just can't buy. It's beautiful and fun to play, as all of Gary's music is. So I'm just very grateful to have it in the collection. And, just again, a plug, any harpist who likes it and would like to program it, please be sure and report it to the Earth at Heart website hub, earthatheart.org, and you can make that, you can turn your music into money through the Earth at Heart nonprofit foundation. So thank you, Gary, for this wonderful piece.
I like that. I like the idea of music into money is usually the other way.
That's for sure. That is for sure. So
I was very honored to have been asked to write the piece. I love your playing, and I love the way you played the Hypnotized piece with Jason. So I think I had been fooling around with an idea, and I thought, oh, this would work, I think. So I wrote it, and I write a lot of music. I just write all the time. And my dad played the harp. He studied with Mildred Dilling. And my dad actually, I have a couple letters from Harpo Marx because his lesson was always next to my dad's. And my dad arranged some music for him because he used to write music out with letters because Harpo didn't read music. And so that's kind of nice. But anyway, I had zero interest in the harp growing up, I think, because it would have just been another hour every day with my dad giving me a lesson. I was already being taught the piano and the flute and being quizzed about how many Haydn string quartets there were, et cetera, all the time. So I got into it because I wrote a piece called Garden and Harp a long time ago, I think in the early 90s. And Emily Mitchell, I gave it to her, and it was a mess. It was this scrawled manuscript thing. And she said, I really like this piece. I've been learning it, and I'd like to record it and do some of your other stuff. And it just happened at a critical moment in my life because my mother was at the end of her life. And I sat there and I listened to Emily play this piece, and it was unlike anything I'd ever written. Because, writing for harp is so different from writing for anything else, and it just pulls different things out of a composer. And there's an article today in the New York Times about, the world needs more harp music and why there isn't any, and about composers being intimidated by the harp. But I don't know. I mean, it takes a long time to learn harp music. I think certainly longer than flute music, because it's so much more complicated. There's so much planning with harp playing. Oh, unmute. I can't hear you. Thanks.
What I love about your music is that you do play the harp, and you are, I think, very often, not always, but very often, the most idiomatic music comes from folks who actually, obviously play their instruments. And, I don't know that I have sat down to a single movement or piece of yours that does not lay in the hand, which I think is, and by lay in the hand, I mean, you play the harp, so you know how to make a piece work for this instrument. And, I also find that, from a harpistic standpoint, just the execution of your pieces, I love that they are not, they're not no-brainers by any means. And I think that is also good, because my experience is that very often, kind of until I wrote that book on composing for the harp, that I passed out liberally to anybody now who isn't a harpist and who wants to write for the harp. Before that time, I would say most pieces that I would be handed, and I was handed a lot of them, were either needlessly simplistic or rather blatantly non-idiomatic. And what is wonderful about your music is they kind of hit that sweet spot where we're not just like, doing nothing but moving pedals and, flying around trying to do things that are, somewhat impractical. But you also give the harpist a chance to really be a musician as well, and shape a line. I find that many times composers don't trust harpists with a long line, a long melody, and in the orchestra, those long lines and melodies are usually given to sustaining instruments, flute, violin, cello, oboe, instruments that don't pluck or attack like a percussion instrument. But you in this piece, Memory of Trees is a wonderful example of the way you weave a melody along with that wonderful rippling, harp noodle material that we do so well. But we've also got this great melody that we can really do something with. And there's such a wistful quality to it. Your title is perfect, Memory of Trees, because it does, the whole piece feels like a memory. It feels like a memory of something, something precious, at least to me.
Well, I appreciate all that so much. Thank you. I guess after I did this recording back in 2011, I just decided I've got to write more harp music because it's good and it's not like anything else I write. So I rented a harp and I started teaching myself how to play. And I'm addicted now. I just, I play it every day. I'm starting to get better, which is exciting. But I guess I'm the kind of person that likes to figure things out on my own. And, it's an amazing instrument. There's nothing like it. I just love the way it rings through my body. It's kind of the opposite of the flute. The flute needs a room, but the harp is a room. It's just... it's this room and you're just in it. So I love it. And I love your playing and I'm delighted that you're enjoying my music.
One thing from just the harp technique execution standpoint that I might offer for anyone who is interested in learning it and playing it, I would say, and I am admittedly, this is kind of one of my kooky things, but I am very fascinated, and I would go so far as to say a little bit obsessed with the elimination of surface noise at the harp. So what I would say is, if if a harpist is interested in kind of going down that rabbit hole of like really examining your hand size, the proportions of your fingers, and how you can wrangle this instrument with a minimum of surface noise. And by surface noise, sometimes it's called buzzing. It's just when your knuckle, your finger, some part of your hand hits a string that's ringing, and makes a sort of resultant noise. So I'm kind of obsessed with the elimination of that. And your piece is a wonderful exercise in really figuring out how you've got to angle your hand, how you've got to manage whatever kind of hand you have to avoid that unnecessary contact. So what I find, like in the section that begins, I don't know how many of you might have the music in front of you, but in the section that begins in bar 4 at the a tempo, what I try and do a lot of in your piece is what I kind of call spider fingering, where you can't, we harpists love to get as many fingers on at once as we can do. But I find that in your piece, there's a lot of, it's kind of like Don Juan, all those overlapping arpeggios that we have to do, and we can't really block place on a lot of those. And that is very, very much applicable in your piece, where I have to kind of roll into some of those arpeggios to keep there from being contact that is going to make extraneous noise. And I think that also it gives the piece a little bit more of a floaty nature. And I also take some of the melody notes. I'm looking at my part here, which is just kind of a Frankenstein mass of fingerings and and different ideas. I'm looking at one of my early drafts before I turned it into something neat. And I end up, especially like in places like bar 5, 6, I do a lot of those melody notes with single kind of floating thumbs. Instead of, we often think that we want to dum pa da da da, we want to try and connect it in some way. But what I do is da pa da 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 dum pa pum pum pum. And that way I can really squeeze those thumbs, and that being a melody, it will sound continuous because it's being played with the same finger. Instead of having different calluses, different fingers hitting the different notes in the line. That's just something I do. That might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I thought I might share that because I sort of arrived on that a number of years ago as a way to control the gradation of a melody. Try and, if you can, it doesn't work as well for some reason with second fingers. There tends to be a little bit more of a doinky quality when you're doing that, but you can kind of squeeze and almost knead like you would dough with your thumbs in a very beautiful melody like you've offered many of in this piece. So that's just kind of a weird, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a little bit of a hack sometimes when I'm trying to find a way to make a melody very cohesive and kind of softly lay on top of a more rippling line.
That sounds perfect to me. I think that's how I do that thing. I think because of my, with cobbled together technique, it's just what felt right to me. I'm sure I do a lot of things wrong. I have fun.
We lost Yolanda again, I think.
I remember. I'm like all those guys on the news that forget to unmute themselves. I think what, just in a broader sense, as in terms of how this piece fits into the larger product, the larger process and concept rather of 5 minutes for Earth. There are some pretty spiky pieces in that collection, and then there's some other ones that kind of take you to a time and place. And what I love is the variety of that, but I love Gary's piece so much because I think one of the most important things we can do with this collection and in music in general is put people in mind of something. And I think that idea of memory of trees is so completely captured in this piece, because as I said, it has kind of a wistful, kind of like a reminiscent, I won't say so much melancholy, but it makes you feel like it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, but all this beauty might be something either you've lost or you might lose, which is perfect as a an emblem of what we're going through with our environmental issues. We've got so much, but unless we get real serious about these issues, we will lose them eventually. And that idea of that little bit of wistful melancholy is just so touching, I find, in this piece. I just love playing it. It's just beautiful. I hope everybody knows where to get it, and that, Kim, that's your cue to tell people how to get this piece, because not only is it great for your hands, great for your technique, you will learn a lot in the process of making this piece sound beautiful. But it's also just gorgeous to play and gorgeous to hear. So thank you, Gary, for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Yolanda, we did have one question. I'll just throw it out. This is a big one. We might not have time to go into it too much right now, but somebody asked about fingering. Do you have any suggestions for how to approach that? I know there's a lot of big arpeggios that you might play differently than how you see them on the page.
Again, here, can you hear me? What I try and do, and just one example, but this, there are quite a few bars that are just right in the wheelhouse where I think, probably, exactly what to do, Constance, with those. But I think the tricky ones are, and you can tell me if this is correct, but the tricky ones are perhaps things like bar 4, 5, and 6. And what I do is I try and make my thumbs land on the first note of the melody. So ba 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 bum 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 ba da, and then I take everything else with my left hand. And then you can kind of come up, not everything. I come up 4, 3, 2, 1. And land on those melody notes whenever I can. It's not completely consistent in terms of what I do, but I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah, ba da 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 dum bum bum ba da 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 yeah, ba da 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 dum ba da dum yum. So does that answer your question, or did you have a specific bar? Because I can zero in if you'd like me to.
I think this was a question. A question from Ben or Steph. I can't quite tell. But Yolanda, I think that was very helpful. I had some of the same questions as I was playing through the piece this week about fingering, and that's I'm going to go back and try exactly what you just suggested. That was extremely helpful, and it's been so great hearing you and Gary talk about the piece and hearing more about Gary, your approach to the harp. And I just want to thank you both for being here, and also Elizabeth Volpé Bligh. Thank you so much to everyone and to all of our people for joining us today. I wanted to let you know that we will be announcing our May monthly music club picks at the end of April. You can keep a lookout for the announcement on social media. And if you want to get an email reminder, sign up. There's a link in the blog where you can sign up and be put on our email list to get that reminder in your mailbox.
I just remembered one more thing I forgot to mention, because I wrote something dumb in the notes for pedal harp playing this. Obviously, you can't set the levers, so you just leave it with the C sharp, and it doesn't, like, the glisses are fine like that. So that was just my other thing I was going to mention. So all the C sharps could be set, like when you do those glissandos. You'd have to change the pedals from time to time, but I think any pedal harpist could manage this quite nicely.
Great. Yeah, I've been playing it on pedal harp, and it's been working great.
That's it.
great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I did put the link to sign up for the monthly music club announcements. So if you're not signed up, click on that link. It's free to get signed up for the mailing list. Thank you again to our guest artists for joining us today. This has been a really, really lovely conversation. And we look forward to seeing everybody back next month.
All right. Bye.